So what a privilege it is to be able to speak after Delvin. So how about that? Delvin, that was terrific. No, thank you. Absolutely terrific. I want to thank Basics. I want to thank Arn Quakelar for his leadership. 16 years ago, I did an internship with Arn Quakelar, and I'm thankful for Mark Malowitz. Our church has supported Mark for the last 15, 16 years, and we're thankful for the continuing leadership with Gary and Lori. We love Basics at Southbrook. My name is Jonathan. I'm one of the pastors at Southbrook Church, and I am thankful to be here. I want to talk really quickly about the story of our church, my story. I don't like sharing this, to be honest with you. I don't like talking about either of these things publicly because there is a lot of hurt and a lot of pain woven into both of these stories. So I'm pastor at Southbrook. We're in Franklin on the south side of Milwaukee County. Our church just turned 20 years old this past week, and it's been crazy. The last 6 years or so, we've had phenomenal growth, more than quadrupled in size in 6 years. The last 6 months, we've had some of the strongest things of our life. I'm going to tell you some numbers, but for a reason. Christmas, we had over 1,200 people. Easter, we had over 1,300 people. Last year, we baptized 70 people, sent 130 on missions trips last year. Absolutely phenomenal. It sounds great, but in reality, Southbrook Church is a church that very recently, not too long ago, actually caused a tremendous amount of hurt to a lot of people, including myself and to my own family. 14 years ago, we were about to collapse as a church. Our founding pastor resigned 6 years after starting the church. 2/3 of our people had left. There's a lot of damaged people in the area because of the implosion of our church. Some people felt hurt because our founding pastor left. Some people felt that he was pushed out. Others didn't like me or didn't like our elders. Many people said that I hurt them in the process. I remember an elder leaving our church saying, "God is going to curse this church." And what do you say to that? And at the age of 30, I found myself I found myself the only pastor. We were 70 total people at the time. I'm sharing this because as a pastor, it's actually the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. And the reason why I never wanted to be a pastor is because of our topic today, church hurt. So I grew up the son of a pastor. My father pastored a church in Washington State. I became a president of a Christian organization, sat on the boards of Christian colleges and universities, had an earned doctorate from a prestigious seminary, hobnobbed with national Christian figures. And from the outside, his life looked like the ideal Christian life, like the standard of what could happen in Christian leadership. Perfect family, the success story. But for most of my father's life, he was living a lie. Domestic abuse, substance abuse, absentee father, vindictive boss, deep-rooted narcissism, a master manipulator. I remember one Thanksgiving morning showing up at my parents' house for the Thanksgiving meal, and my mom telling me that earlier that day my father held a loaded gun to her head. He spent time in and out of mental health facilities, threatened to kill our family. We had restraining orders for years that we carried around. I remember the bulk of those restraining orders and how they wouldn't fit in my wallet, but I always went with them because that was the only protection that I had. The church covered up for him. There it is, right? Christian ministries covered up for him because they viewed him as a success. They overlooked his struggles. No one ever wanted to dig deep to my mom and ask if she was okay. The pressure that was placed on our family was unbearable. To act normal in such an abusive relationship is extremely soul-crushing. My father died a few years ago, separated from his family, never having seen any of his grandkids. So my wife and I walked into Southbrook as regular, normal people just a few months after it started. We were looking for a church. And we got involved and we started serving. And being at Southbrook almost from its beginning as regular people and then on staff as associate and then as the lead pastor has been absolutely phenomenal, but there's been a lot of hurt. And there was a few times that even we wanted to leave our own church. I'm just being honest. 19 years ago, as I sat in the family court as my parents' divorce was finalized, it was just a few days later that my wife gave birth to our only child, our son, Jacob. And it was a traumatic delivery. She nearly died in the process. My wife spent 2 months in the hospital afterwards, unable to leave the hospital. And I wasn't on staff at the time, but we were attending the church, Southbrook, and I remember our pastor coming to visit us. He didn't know what to say. He didn't pray with us. He didn't read his Bible. He made some awkward jokes, was very uncomfortable. He left without praying, and afterwards my wife and I said, what is this? This isn't it. We're family. We're believers. This isn't a church. Who would do this? And that wound is deep, as you can tell. It's just one example of what it means to be hurt by your own church. Growing up the son of a pastor, experiencing this level of abuse, seeing how churches and Christian ministries helped to cover for my father, and witnessing firsthand the lack of trust and belief towards those who were abused left me not wanting anything to do with church. I'm sharing this not because it's the worst story in the world. I know that. I know from hearing many of us that we have far worse situations that we have gone through. But it's my story, and it's the story of my heartbreak and the story of our church. So growing up in that environment, to be a pastor was the last thing in the world that I wanted to do. I got C's and D's in my Bible classes. I'm just being honest with you. It's true, in college I got C's and D's. I actually have a lot of anxiety. My anxiety only comes around when I'm around other people and public speaking. So how about that? It's true. I'm not lying. My goal in life was to work for the CIA. I was a history political science major in college. When I was in high school, actually, the CIA contacted me about their student services program. So God has a phenomenal sense of humor, right? To find me at this church, which continues to grow faster than what we know what to do with it. I think one of the reasons, there's two reasons, well, there's many reasons why Southbrook has grown. It's Jesus who knows what he is doing, and we don't. We follow as he leads. But one of the reasons is we just have absolutely amazing staff at our church that far exceed our abilities. A lot of our staff are here. I'd like to honor Tammy, who's our worship pastor, and the rest of our team is sitting over here. Thank you for being a part of our staff, so thank you. But one of the reasons why I think our church has grown is that we have become a refuge for hurting people. We've become a refuge for broken people. People like me who are hurt by church, right? Romans 14:19. So then let us aim for harmony in the church and try to build each other up. And I've realized a few things, and I'll share one of them, or I'll share some of them for you to write down. But one of the things I realize when people are coming to you and they're hurting and broken, it's the temptation to say, oh, I see what they're doing there, and that we would never do that here. That is a huge temptation that has come up. And so we have learned it is better to listen and to affirm than to say, oh, you will never be hurt here. The reality is you will be hurt at our church because we're full of broken, messed up people at our church. And so we've learned to listen and to affirm. I've also realized that hurt people, right? So people that come that are hurting tend to hurt other people. And so there needs to be a tremendous amount of extra grace that is given to those people. I've got 3 quick truths for you that we've learned about being a church where hurting people come. And so you see them behind me. The first one is right there. Almost every single person coming in your doors is hurting. Right? We affirm the fact that sin stains every aspect of our being and every one of us, and that includes our church relationships as well. It is just a part of this universe, and we can't underestimate it, which means that we have to show a tremendous amount more grace and love to our people than what we realize. So for us, we've learned to get to know your story before we judge, before we label, before we try to categorize, before we try to assign, oh, that's who you are or that's where you're coming from. So like I said, I've just got 3 quick truths for us all. Almost everyone is hurting. Here's the second one. We too have been hurt by church, right? When Gary and Lori first mentioned this topic to talk about hurting churches, it occurred to me, oh my word, of all the things we talk about as pastors, we've never talked about this ever. And maybe that's one of the problems we have, is that we just have never talked about this. And so we need to affirm that we too have been hurt by church. If any of us have grown up in the church, if any of us have been in church, we have been hurt by church. And it's not easy to say that, it's not easy to admit that, it's easy to have the pretend, but we're well past that. Probably all of us could pull up our list of pastors or church leaders who have hurt us. And we see this nationally and we see this locally, abuse and scandals and pastors caught up in the actions of other people. And if we're honest, and if we're really honest, maybe we've been hurt by other people even in this room here today. I don't know the level of honesty we're willing to have, but we too have been hurt by church. Here's my third point for us. we're honest, we have hurt others. We will never admit this, but let's be honest. Being in leadership means that we have intentionally or unintentionally hurt other people. Sometimes we do it, we don't even know we're doing it. We're just the best meaning possible, but we have hurt other people. We've said things rash, we've said things improperly, we've said things that without thinking, this just happens to us. And when we realize that we are guilty of this, that we carry this weight, we then reflect God's grace in a pure way to other people because we know that we have hurt other people. And so now when I look back at the life of our church and I look back at my own life, I can say, if only but for the grace of God, right? This is his plan in pulling together a broken pastor and a broken team of staff, leading a broken church for his honor and for his glory. I can see how God can redeem the abuse, how God can redeem the hurt, and flip that and use that for good. This is why we celebrate the cross, right? The ultimate abuse and shame that God flips and is able to redeem for the best good possible. And so looking back in my life, I can see how God can redeem the abuse and the sufferings that we have gone through as a family and as a church to allow us to be a church that helps to heal hurting people. And this is how God works. He uses the weak, he uses the broken, he uses the messed up, he uses the least likely to do his plan because then he gets the glory and he gets the honor. So I've got 2 questions for you that I'd like you to discuss at your table, and you see them behind me. How can God use our story, our own story of hurt, to help other people? And that second question is, how does knowing that we've hurt others change the way that we can help others? These are challenging questions, especially that second one. We've got 10 minutes to discuss at our tables, my friends. Let's go ahead and discuss these questions together.